This is the moment in court the handcuffs came off and wouldn't be put back on, thanks to these words.
The indictment is dismissed and sealed.
A day they never knew would come.
Still shocked because this is supposed to have happened a long time ago. They knew the truth.
Thomas Malik, Vincent Ellerby, and James Irons were all teenagers back in 1995 when Harry Kaufman was murdered by people who firebombed the subway token booth where he worked in Brooklyn. Kaufman was blown out of the booth, engulfed in flames, dying from his injuries 2 weeks later.
A Kings County grand jury has returned a multi-count indictment.
That was from a press conference from December 1995, when all three teens were indicted, eventually convicted of murder.
The system can't run itself. Yeah. They need somebody to run it.
Well put.
So if you don't got the right people in there running that system, it's what happened.
What happened was described in a courtroom for close to an hour on Friday and outlined in about 200 pages of documents released by the Brooklyn DA's office. The cases, as one legal expert said, are, quote, comparable to some of the worst wrongful convictions I have ever seen.
The injustice cannot be corrected. But what we are here to do is not perpetuate the injustice.
The investigation by the DA's office showed many issues, including a conflicting eyewitness identification, at least one false confession obtained through sleep deprivation and violence, and evidence from the scene directly contradicting the faulty confessions. Then there was the fact that James Irons actually called 911 that night, 1 minute after the explosion, having a conversation with an operator about hearing the nearby blast before handing the phone to his mom.
They was just looking for a conviction. They didn't care who it was.
Vincent Ellerby says prison changed him.
And it's a nightmare.
Definitely a nightmare.
It's a nightmare.
He says he developed epilepsy while incarcerated. Paroled since 2020, Ellerby has been working as a chef. Thomas Malik will now work to figure out what's next. First, though, he's going to see his mom.
I'm just happy that she's alive to see this day.
A day this trio has waited nearly 30 years for, to be free. And Ellerby says there's nothing that can take away what they've had to endure, no amount of money that can make up for it. And he opened up to the courtroom. He has a daughter who's 26, and he said to the court she hates him because he wasn't there for most of her life. He was in prison for a crime the DA's office has now admitted he didn't commit. Eric Feldman, New York 1.
For months, we've reported to you about the staffing crisis on Rikers Island. The Correction Officers Union says city jails have gotten too violent and there aren't enough people to police them. Critics say there are plenty of officers, but way too many are abusing unlimited sick leave. Tonight, the I-Team has the numbers, and they don't lie. Chris Glorioso used the Freedom of Information law to obtain a jail payroll database. It shows even as the pandemic eased, sick calls from officers on Rikers made a staggering surge.
Say it again. Grandma.
Nicholas Feliciano has trouble forming words, trouble walking, trouble remembering simple facts. And his grandmother says a culture of carelessness on Rikers Island is to blame.
He's in a hospital on an everyday basis.
In 2019, Feliciano was an 18-year-old jailed on Rikers Island for a parole violation. It was the night before Thanksgiving, and he'd just been injured in a fight. This Board of Correction report says Feliciano waited more than 5 hours for a medical transport, then hung himself in a holding pen. Investigators determined he hung for 7 minutes and 51 seconds before DOC staff cut him down. During that time, he was observed hanging motionless on several occasions by at least 7 officers.
One officer went into the cell, looked at him, turned around and walked out while he was hung up.
Investigators said at least 7 officers failed to take action that shift, but payroll records show many more were absent altogether. According to data obtained by the I-Team, a third of officers at Feliciano's jail were out on leave Thanksgiving. That kind of absentee rate was a rarity in 2019 when just 302 officers called out sick on the average day. But look how this calendar gets read. By the first 3 quarters of last year, sick calls went up to 754 a day. That's a 150% increase. But were correction officers really 150% more sick?
I think it's essentially a systems breakdown. Once one officer knows, you know what, you can just call out sick and they're still going to keep paying you. then why does the person next to you still come to work? And
City Comptroller Brad Lander says the pandemic is no excuse for that explosion in sick leave, and he says this graph proves it.
The blue line is absentee rates, and the red line is positive COVID tests.
It plots COVID-positive cases among uniformed jail staff against sick calls. And look, starting in 2021, even when COVID cases were plummeting, sick calls were peaking.
We're looking at more recent data that shows the absenteeism crisis remains to this day.
The union representing correction officers declined an interview and declined to look at the payroll data. But that didn't stop Union President Benny Basio from claiming the data is flawed. In a statement to the I-Team, he said the city's Office of Payroll Administration has consistently failed to pay jail officers for hundreds of overtime hours, and therefore the data they provided as a basis for this one-sided story is as reliable as their overtime payments to our officers. The city's payroll office stands by that data.
We have had over 1,300 uniformed staff return to work since the beginning of this year.
The current jail commissioner, Luis Molina, declined an interview, but in recent months he's claimed a nearly 40% reduction in staff out sick and the suspension of 100 officers caught abusing sick leave.
You got this.
Nicholas Feliciano and his family are now suing the Department of Correction for that delay in cutting him down after hanging himself on Thanksgiving Eve. No one can know if more officers at work would have made a difference that night. But had there been more staff, Feliciano's family says there's a better chance someone might have had a conscience.
I don't know how a person could go to work and leave someone hanging for 7 minutes and 51 seconds and it's okay. No, it's not okay.
Because the case is still active, the city's lawyers declined comment on Nicholas Feliciano's lawsuit. The union representing correction officers blamed the former jail commissioner in part for the spike in sick time usage, saying his policy of requiring sick days be verified through city-paid doctors caused delays in getting appointments. The former commissioner disagrees. He's now calling for a federal receiver to take over Rikers Island. Chris Glorioso, News 4, New York.
Not sleeping? Not sleeping? Is someone snoring? At PC Richard & Son, our 4-step mattress fitting process can help you find the right mattress, so your new bed fits you perfectly. PC Richard & Son. Good night.
Mayor Eric Adams toured Rikers Island today, offering his support to New York City correction officers. The mayor says they have been neglected and torn down by previous administrations. And investigative reporter Sarah Wallace was there on Rikers Island with the mayor.
This is an example of what they retrieved.
Mayor Adams touting the success of tactical searches reinstituted on Rikers under his administration. 2,700 weapons and contraband seized since February. The mayor said that's resulted in a 63% decrease in slashings and stabbings and a 30% drop in assaults on staff, resulting in use of force. But what about inmate deaths? 3 in recent days.
We look at the number, hey, 3 people died, but why did they die? You know, what condition did they have before they came to Rikers Island? The headline does not tell the story.
The mayor and his DOC commissioner, Luis Molina, surrounded by uniformed DOC brass, were repeatedly asked about reports that officers were faking being sick. The two said 1,400 have come back since January. 900 are out sick now, but that's a drop since last summer.
Well, I don't have any evidence that right now that anybody's faking it. We have medical doctors that are deeming individuals that are sick.
The only place that we're asking, hey, your members are faking. I mean, that's not a pattern to you. Something is not wrong with that.
Staffing remains an issue. Nearly 500 officers have retired or resigned since January, 125 hired in the same period of time. The city council rejected a proposed 578 new hires in the next fiscal budget year.
Shame on the city council for not approving these officers. Like, you know, they talk a good game, but, you know, we keep New York City safe.
As for the mayor's position on closing Rikers, he said here today the law states that Rikers will no longer be a jail, but didn't elaborate further. From East Elmhurst, Sarah Wallace, News 4 New York.
The family of a man who died while in custody at New York City's infamous Rikers Island Jail plans to file a $25 million lawsuit against the city following a string of inmate deaths inside the correctional facility in recent years. The July 10th death of Elijah Muhammad, 31, has prompted the firing of a correction officer and louder calls to close down the jail. Muhammad had been held at the Georgia Vierno Center, a high-security jail on Rikers Island, since June on an assault charge. He was the 10th inmate to die this year, the New York Times reported. Incarceration at a Rikers Island jail should not be a death sentence, Sanford Rubenstein, an attorney for Muhammad's family, said in a statement attached to a notice of claim that a lawsuit is forthcoming. The family of Elijah Muhammad will fully cooperate with the investigation of his wrongful death by the New York City Department of Investigation. The lawsuit will reportedly allege negligent supervision and security at the jail complex. Days before his death, Muhammad had been held for 32 hours in solitary confinement, a period that exceeds the New York City Department of Corrections guideline of 6 hours. The claim said he appeared disoriented, barely able to walk, and needed medical attention, it said. However, the decedent was left to die in his cell and remained deceased in his cell for a length of time that his body began to show signs of rigor mortis, the claim said. Louis Molina, commissioner of the New York City Department of Correction, has resisted calls for a federal takeover of the jail amid several scandals linked to the complex. Fox News has reached out to the doc for comment. Muhammad's death came less than a month after two other Rikers inmates died, Albert Dry and Annabelle Carrasquillo. Dry, 50, died in a hospital while suffering unknown complications, while Carrasquillo, 39, died from a drug overdose, the New York Daily News reported. After Muhammad's death, Molina said his department referred the case for possible criminal review. We treat every death with the utmost seriousness and understand that it is our mandate to keep every person entrusted to our care safe, he said, according to the Times.